Hello and welcome. I'm Claire Feldman, your host and guide on this journey to thriving in private practice without the burnout. Are you a passionate therapist who's struggling with the entrepreneurial side of things? Do you wish you could serve great fit clients at times that suit you? Are you seeking financial stability so you can continue doing what you love? If so, then you're in the right place. I know firsthand the difficulties of navigating the business aspects of therapy, from building a website to managing social media, but I've made all the mistakes so you don't have to. Together we'll explore how you can build and grow your dream practice. So let's get started. Hello, Shelley, and you are very, very welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so looking forward to this conversation, and we were talking a little bit before we hit record, and I think there is a really good conversation to be had for therapists to really explore and hear ways of potentially expanding beyond one-to-one. Because whenever I was having a little look at your website, I was just so impressed with seeing you actually have a practice set up on your website and you have lots of other services that you offer, from public speaking to supervision. So there's lots of tangents
There is.
we could go off. So we'll try and focus on, I guess, your journey and how your journey has evolved. And maybe the best place to start is a little bit about how you even got into becoming a therapist in the first place.
Yeah. I was actually a nurse, a mental health nurse to begin with. That was kind of like my first job after leaving university. And in that role, I worked in like forensic kind of inpatient settings, which was quite tough.
Sure.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy environment to be in. But from the frying pan into the fire, then I went and joined the military to be a nurse in the military for about 14 years. But it was during that role that I did like lots of additional training, because the job was really working like one-to-one therapeutically with people. So that was where I trained to be a CBT therapist, and I trained to be an EMDR therapist. Yeah.
And from there, that was working within other services. When did you make that kind of leap into setting up your own private practice?
Yeah. About It was about 4 or 5 years ago now. So it started off as like a side hustle.
As it often does.
Exactly. It was always like, I always wanted to do it. I've always had this like real sense of how lovely it would be to kind of run things my way, and to have a practice where I could base things on what I valued and not what an organization told me I had to do. So it was always an aspiration for a really long time. But it was when I left the military, and I went to a part-time NHS job, and I set up the practice as a kind of, a bit of a side hustle, really, just to see if I could get any work, to see, if I liked it. And then very quickly it grew from there. Um,
And how would you say that happened? Because I think what you're just describing is what a lot of therapists will experience, is that they will see private practice as almost like a little bit of extra pocket money, as a little bit of a side hustle, and not necessarily see it initially as actually this could become my full-time career and this could become like a really nice income for me. So when you first started in private practice, where did your referrals come from?
yeah. Yeah, I think lots of us see it as a kind of, I don't know, like a bit of a dream, a pipe dream. Like we're not sure if it can actually become enough to be our main source of income. So initially, I did start out with a website. I felt that was really important. Again, I wanted to do things on my terms. And so using directories and platforms and stuff like that is great for additional sources of referrals. But for me, like, the website was really important, because that was a space where I could really talk about who I was and what I offered. And I own that space.
In my language here now.
Right.
Yeah, I delivered a workshop about 2 weeks ago that was specifically around blogging and about SEO and about your website, because I'm really, really focused for therapists around prioritizing the platforms that you own. And your website really essentially is probably one of the most important pieces of marketing that you could have, because if you market through social media, what if your account gets hacked?
Yeah.
Lose everything. So your website is always yours to have and yours to own. And you're right, it's your place to be able to put your stamp on it, to speak to your ideal client, and for it to be completely and authentically you.
Yeah.
So great to hear that was kind of in your focus whenever you were getting started as well.
It was the first thing I did, really. I started, I built it myself. I just did a little bit of research, asked around, and lots of people recommended different platforms. So I chose one and just thought, let's see. So it took a while because I was juggling work and parenting and stuff, but I just started to play around with it and build something that I liked the look of. But I think it is important because for me, if I look on a directory, I want to follow the link. I want to know more.
Yeah.
So even if I find somebody on Instagram or, the counselling directory or Psychology Today or whatever, I want to go and learn more, because I think we live in that world now, don't we, where we want to really know about somebody. We want to know what they're all about, and we want to get a sense of them before we buy from them.
100%. It's like taking people on a journey, isn't it? Even if they come to the directory first, the next natural place might be to go to your website. And then there's links potentially from your website to your Instagram or to your Facebook. And I think that they can all serve different purposes, and that your directory is the initial thing that might bring them in. The website is an opportunity to get to know you a little bit more. And then social media might be like to hear your voice. Is your voice annoying? Do I like the sound of you? What kind of things are you talking about? Are am I connecting with what you're saying? So they all can serve very much different purposes, but you're right in that people nowadays, I think, expect more.
Yeah, they do. And they should really. I think, if I'm paying someone to talk to them about the things that distress and trouble me the most, I want to know who I'm talking to. Know?
And I wonder, interesting that I didn't realize it was just 2020 that you said, so in that sort of pandemic and then post-pandemic era as well, where a lot of things transitioned to online. I think the landscape of looking for a therapist has definitely changed post-COVID than pre.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I remember, looking for a therapist for myself at various points and kind of having this 2-mile radius that I could get to in sufficient time after work in that small pocket of the day. I think that's completely changed now. I work with clients all over the country, and I think it's opened up so much more choice for people, which is a good thing, because then they can really choose to work with someone that they want to work with because they've chosen, rather than that's just, the nearest person in the 2, 5, 10-mile proximity of where they live.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's amazing in that, yeah, absolutely. People can really do their research now. They can really find the person who feels that it's the right fit for them, and that person could be anywhere. And I'm the same. I have clients um, all over the UK and not just in Northern Ireland. The drawback, I think, of that is that for therapists now, we have to be marketing ourselves much more effectively. Like you said, we need to think beyond just the directory profile. We need to think about our ideal client, and we need to learn and develop all of these skills that many of us haven't been taught. And for you, am I right in saying you do have kind of a niche area around trauma?
I do now. I do. I fought it for a while. Maybe I'm scared of commitment or something, but I did. I think I avoided having a clear niche because I was scared. I was scared that I wouldn't get enough work. I was scared that I might alienate certain groups of people. I was scared that what if I change my mind and I don't want to work in this niche anymore? So there was a lot of fear-based stuff going on. So I really avoided honing in. Ironically, all the work I was doing was still in my niche, even when it wasn't very clearly my niche. So eventually I kind of got the hint and just went all in. And that's been a bit of a game changer, to be quite honest, in terms of like other work opportunities and other sort of avenues in the business that have evolved because of developing that niche.
What you're saying there, a lot of therapists will really resonate with is this fear of niching down because they're scared that they're going to alienate people. And I think especially when they're getting started in private practice, we want to say yes, don't we? We want to help everybody. We want to make ourselves available and accessible to everyone. So it feels very counterintuitive to niche, but actually what you're describing is so true. The more you become known in an area, known as a go-to person or known as an authority in your particular niche area, it actually opens up more opportunities, really, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think that this kind of fear, like it stops us taking action, doesn't it? I think if there's one thing that got in the way through my business journey, it's always fear. It's always an anxiety. It's always something that stops me from just testing something out or trying it out or taking the plunge. But I think maybe as well, like for therapists who are moving from sort of organizations in particular, like there's an expectation that you can provide great therapy for all types of problems, for all types of people. And so we're sort of socialized into that way of thinking that we ought to be able to work with anybody. And we probably can. But from a business point of view, it doesn't quite make sense, does it? Because again, if I'm, if I am looking for furniture, I was looking for furniture for my office and I wanted a hand-built desk. I went to the furniture guy who specializes in rustic hand-built desks. You want to go to the person who is specialist in that area. And I think that's what clients are looking for, is a therapist who has a specialist set of skills for the problem that they've got.
There's something in there as well about moving from maybe an organization in that you only know what you only know and what you've been used to as well. And so when maybe you've been used to working in that generalist way, or depending on the type of community or organization that you've been working in as well. Because I had a conversation with a mentoring client recently who all she's ever been used to in her counseling career is working within community settings, and people would be accessing for free or low cost. And so she has had this huge kind of block around fee setting as well, because in her experience, people can't afford these fees because that's what she's been used to and not been used to private practice. And actually, you're targeting a different audience, a different group. And it's a hard mindset to move away from, isn't it? When you've been used to maybe the setup of an organization like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the whole as well, like as a collective group, right? Like counselors and therapists, like there's a lot of self-criticism, there's a lot of self-doubt. So we find it really hard to imagine that we have a specialist skill and that somebody's actually going to pay for that. That's kind of, that's like a revelation for most of us, isn't it?
The guilt, I think, that comes with helping people and the attachment of money to it as well, rather than seeing it that actually this person is choosing. They're choosing to come to you. They're choosing to invest in working with you because they want that support and they want that service. And we really have to work on reframing that, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That whole business side of things, I think it's a real like learning curve for most of us, isn't it? It's a whole new bunch of skills to learn alongside taking that plunge into doing private practice.
And so when you first did take that plunge, you focused on your website initially and then had other marketing going on. When did it get to this stage then of actually I can let go of this NHS work?
Yeah, it was fairly quick, if I'm honest. It was my practice filled really quickly. So initially it was like a day a week. That day became a day and an evening. I literally could not squeeze more into my day and evening. So then I dropped another working day and did 2 days. What I also realised, and I do say this to people a lot, is my outgoings for the business was the same, whether I did 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, actually. So the things I was paying for, I needed to pay for to work my 1 day. So then when I dropped another day and did that extra day really was pure profit because I was already paying all my insurance stuff, all my marketing costs, my supervision, et cetera. So I sort of gradually did that up to the point where I couldn't do that anymore. Like I had to choose then because I couldn't fit any more private practice stuff into my week.
That can be quite scary and a little bit daunting, can't it? Moving away from that guaranteed income into private practice.
Yeah, literally terrifying. And no matter how many people are like, it'll be fine. Like, you should have done this sooner. Like, you'll be great. You know, it's all just blind reassurance, isn't it? You don't know until you take the plunge. And it's, you know, I have a mortgage, I've got kids, you know, so I can't really, I felt like I couldn't afford to make the wrong decision. But in the end, I realized by trying to do both stay in an employed role and grow my business, I wasn't giving either of them like my best self because I was just constantly sort of torn between the two things. And I think I kept growing my business, but the time wasn't expanding with it. So it ended up beginning to then feel quite stressful because I was, you know, cramming in probably what was a, you know, 20, 30 hour business week into those 2 days and 2 evenings. So in the end, I had to just take the plunge.
And that decision is probably exactly what you need to be the motivating factor to really make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like I was beginning to miss out on opportunities. So I was being offered things that I couldn't do because I didn't have time. So those opportunities that 10 years ago me was dreaming about were there, but I couldn't take them because I didn't have time in my week. So there are a few things in our personal life I think that were changing around that time too that made that decision making easier, you know, around I needed some time off work for a compassionate reason. And that was actually a far more challenging thing to get in an organization than I needed. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll have to take the time off sick instead. And then it became clear that actually, you know, there's all these rules around how long you have to work somewhere to be entitled to sick pay. And so actually the things I was hanging on to, the safety net of if something happens, I'm in a job and, you know, I'll be supported. And if I'm sick, I get sick pay. It quickly became apparent to me that I was selling myself a bit of a false safety net because those things were happening in my life. And I still couldn't take the time I needed for the compassionate reason.
Yeah. Wow. And you did it, that transition, you did kind of in the ideal way, but you were gradually kind of dropping and reducing down, still having that little bit of a buffer of safety, but ultimately sort of getting to that point where we need to have that sort of blind faith.
Yes.
Blind faith, but also the determination, I guess, to make it work. And you've obviously done fantastically with it because in a short space of time, it really has grown and evolved, hasn't it? Beyond just you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been really surprised, I suppose. Again, maybe it's that self-doubt, but I've been really surprised by how quickly things have taken off in so many ways. You know, so I've gone from doing that kind of, I think I was doing a full day, this 10-hour day of one-to-one therapy, which exhausting, isn't it? To now my week is split between doing some one-to-one therapy, some supervision, some teaching and training, and various events, and then obviously being able to send referrals on to my team of clinical associates.
Do you set your week up to have like certain days for certain things? Does that help you to kind of function a little bit better, or is it all in?
A bit messy, if I'm honest. It's a bit messy. That's kind of how I do things. I have a day where I don't do any appointments, and that's always the same day every week. But I haven't split it really into therapy days, supervision days, teaching days. Mainly, I think, because I like to be flexible. I think that feels important for me. You know, I have a morning where I do in-person therapy because that needs to kind of be contained so that the space is, ready and appropriate. But other than that, it's all a bit of a muddle, and that's okay.
It's with you. I would have been like that. And I'm trying my best to get into like therapy days and then mentoring kind of days just to try and break things up. It doesn't always work like that, mind you. But for me to operate and function, I need that. But this is the beauty of private practice, isn't it? That you get to do it whatever way works for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And actually this idea that like there's no decisions permanent. But I think I tried to have clearly defined days, and I found that quite tricky because it didn't give me the flexibility I wanted. So then I tried to do it differently.
Yeah.
So we can just adjust, can't we?
Yeah, it is. It's whatever works for you. And at what point did it get to actually I can take on associates and I can refer out to other people, like, because that's a relatively quick period of time from you going into private practice.
I know, right? I think it's probably maybe it's 2 years now that I've had the associate team. And it just started off as, one person.
Mm.
So I had some referrals from a specific military charity who wanted to work with a very specific kind of therapist. And I didn't have any space, and I wasn't going to have any space anytime soon. And they needed somebody who could work quite quickly. And so I had a trusted colleague who'd just been through a similar transition to me, having left an organization, and they were branching out into doing some private work. But they didn't want to go all in on the website and everything. So it just kind of, it just so happened like they were a really trusted person. And I said, oh, what about this arrangement? And then I started to look into what that would then look like for me. I think now, how many people have we got now?
There's quite a list on your website. It looks like it's a good lot of people.
I think 8, 10, something like that.
Amazing.
I know, it's crazy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
How did you go about then beyond that one? So it was somebody that was trusted, somebody you knew you could refer to. How did it get to the point now where it's, almost
Yeah.
10?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's word of mouth.
Mhm.
So this was kind of where it started. That's how my practice started to feel, word of mouth. And this is kind of what's happened with the associate thing as well. So that one person became another person again who was in a similar situation. They wanted to see what that was like working privately. So they had a couple of associate options. And then that kind of another person followed suit. Most of these people are within my professional network. Like I felt like that was quite important to me that I had knowledge of their practice, had knowledge of how they operate, and also that they have similar values to me in terms of how they work therapeutic. So I suppose there was quite a bit of organic growth in it, so I didn't sort of ramp up any particular kind of marketing, but I just found because I kept on top of my website, kept checking the SEO, like that steady flow of referrals just kept coming in. And of course, uh, the more I grew my business, the more the other opportunities for me grew, which continued to limit my capacity to do therapy. And therefore that work would flow out to the associate team.
Brilliant. So it's sort of kind of it's organically growing, really. And do you mind me asking, you don't have to talk about specific sort of numbers or rates or anything. How does the model benefit you and benefit them? So obviously the referrals all come into your website and that you're the person that's done all the marketing and the SEO and the work behind it. How does it mutually benefit then for both you and them?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say The benefits for me are that I can keep referrals within my business. And that feels quite important because the whole word of mouth thing continues, right? So somebody has a positive experience within my business, whether it's with me or an associate, and then they go and then they make that recommendation. And that's important to me. And also, the people that I work with are all people that I feel like I know that that onward referral is to like somebody who I rate, which is quite important to me. And then the other thing for me is we do have a couple of very small charities that refer to us. There isn't like a service level agreement or anything like that. There's just kind of a local agreement that my business is like one of their preferred providers. So I like to be able to have the capacity in the team to support those referrals. It's quite nice having a team. I suppose that's another benefit for me. Like, it's just nice having like a bunch of people who are like-minded people. So for them, what they get, I suppose, is they get an opportunity to test the water in private practice without having to go all in, which I think that puts a lot of people off, the idea of having to build their own website and things like that. It gives them a sort of space to try it out and see if they like it. And some of my associates have gone on to build their own practices, but it's really nice is they still do a bit of work with me too. They're marketed on our website, and the website does have good SEO. So actually, for some of them, if you Google them, the website will pop up with their bios and things like that. It's a source of referrals for them, which I think is a good safety net for people, isn't it?
Absolutely. And is there anything that's required from your perspective, like in terms of setting up as an associate practice legally? Is there anything you have to do?
Depends on the setup, really. So I try and keep things fairly low maintenance if I can. So all of my associates are self-employed, and they all work in other places as self-employed. So legally, that covers us from an IR35 point of view. So they can't be self-employed and only do work for me. They need to be working in other spaces and, offering their self-employed services in other places. And then because of the type of arrangement that we have, because they're then self-employed, it's their responsibility to ensure that they do their taxes, that they have their indemnity insurance, that they maintain their professional registrations. But I've set up some assurance processes around that. So we have an associate agreement, which was initially looked over by a lawyer. And then I've just kind of continued to keep that same agreement as things have evolved. And then I also have like an onboarding process where we check out people's documentation and things like that. They need to provide like an annual update of their indemnity. Even though legally, I don't hold responsibility for that. I feel like ethically and from an insurance point of view, it's important for me to have some oversight.
Okay, so you've tried to keep it as ensuring that everything is done as it should be, but to try and keep the model as simple for yourself as possible. And then in terms of creating a revenue, I guess an additional revenue for you, is it like a percentage of
Yes.
therapies?
Yeah. So what usually happens is, so we take on the role of liaising with clients, getting all their registration details. I do a triage call to match them with a therapist. Usually we offer clients a couple of options based on their availability and preferences. And then we set up that initial appointment. And then from that point onwards, the therapist liaises with their client. They just let us know when they're seeing their clients. So we take responsibility for all the invoicing as well. I've seen this done in reverse in other spaces where the therapist is responsible for their own invoicing and they pay an associate fee to the parent practice, whereas we do it the other way around. We take responsibility for the invoicing and then we pay the associate an associate fee with the practice keeping a small portion of that.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. So there is a fair amount of work that goes in from your perspective around the client attraction, the paperwork, invoicing, and all of that kind of stuff. Is there any drawbacks for you in doing the associate practice?
I think it does take, it takes a degree of managing. I have VA support, and the VA that I use is amazing. So she can really help with a lot of the sort of administrative side of things. I think there's like personal feelings. Sometimes if we're quiet, I might worry that my associates aren't getting enough work, and do they need that work, and are they reliant on it, even though our agreement is entirely flexible. So they don't have to give me a slot, and I don't have to give them a client. That's the bottom line of the agreement. But obviously, I do feel a sense of responsibility sometimes that I ought to be offering them work if they've signed up with me. But I think I'd say, like, if you've got a team who are engaged, then it's like quite a nice process.
It's lovely, like even just hearing you describing how that journey has evolved, that from right at the beginning, kind of the referrals coming in were because you were known in with the military connection. So you were known as kind of the go-to person. So big green tick for the importance of niching and really kind of focusing on your area of expertise and marketing to that. But then as it grew and as it evolved, it was really about your connections with the therapists, the know, like, and trust, the building up relationships, only referring to people that you know, and really essentially building up your own kind of referral network, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think helping support other therapists who are trying to branch into private practice. So it's not unusual for me to have contact from a therapist that I might have worked with in various organizations to say, I'm branching out into private practice. You know, would you have any work and that kind of thing? So it's quite nice feeling able to sort of support people as they step into that role. And I think there's, because we're a sort of fairly trusted provider for various organizations and charities and that word of mouth thing, I think it like gives endorsement to those people who come and join us, like their faces on the website. There's a piece there where I'm saying this person's really good too, you know?
Right. Do you have any plans for how it's going to continue to evolve? Are you quite happy with how it's working now?
Mm. I have been thinking about that recently, actually. I think it's important to kind of keep reviewing things and thinking about what's working and what isn't. And what works best for sure is working with my associates who are really engaged. So even if they don't have space, they'll like kind of tell me they don't have space or that sort of thing. Like I feel like those are the relationships that work best.
Okay.
And I have thought about whether, there's some marketing that could go into advertising them more actively, because at the moment, their website, but I don't necessarily promote that through other channels like social media and stuff.
Okay. And potentially, you talked before I hit record about you'd love a building, maybe the bricks and mortar.
Oh, yeah, again, I think that's another one of those dreams. So I don't know about you, but like I rented therapy spaces before and have been in therapy spaces that are a bit dingy.
Yeah. Oh,
Like they were a bit damp, or the room's next to the toilet and the soundproofing's not great. People kind of scuttling off the street in a sort of discreet way. So I think it would be lovely to have a premises that could, house local therapists and counsellors, and somewhere that's just a nice environment,
yeah.
a really sort of, it smells good when you walk in, it feels therapeutic, the chair is comfortable, there's, room to do what you need to do, rather than that kind of, I've seen it before, practically like in a broom cupboard.
I feel like you're in someone's living room or something as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that certainly the area I'm in, there aren't many options actually for hiring spaces. So I think that's definitely something that I aspire to in the future.
Yeah. Put it on the goal sheet, get it on the list.
I know, right? Yeah. I have lots of ideas. That's the thing. I probably have about 50 ideas a day. They don't always make it to the.
No, I'm the same. You got to rein it in a little bit of time, but maybe there's something about for people that go into private practice that developing that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think like you have to you either have to have it or you have to really try and nurture it. Because I think so much of going into private practice and doing what you've done was setting up kind of the group practice and then going into teaching and all of these other strings that you have to your bow is that a lot of the time you do have to kind of put yourself out there or you have to go and seek out opportunities. You have to create opportunities. So there is something there about developing this part of us that ordinarily, if we've gone through our counseling training or we've gone through working for employed in organizations that we haven't had to tap into before, have we?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if it's like a human thing as well, isn't it? I think we aren't always encouraged to dream. We're encouraged to kind of have a backup option in case it all goes horribly wrong and choose the sensible option and, to play things safe. And I think sometimes that can get in the way of us taking action. So things, if they're an idea or a dream, they're kind of a nothing until we do something about it. And I think that's really limiting, actually, if we allow ourselves to think about these things and then choose one and take some action towards it. And if it all goes horribly wrong, fine, choose another one. But actually, sometimes it doesn't go horribly wrong, it goes lovely and right.
I'll say it's very resilience building, I think, going into private practice and setting up your own business because there will always be these kind of setbacks, but it's about getting back up again, isn't it? And continuing to try and actually look at the opportunities that have evolved and look at the opportunities that have been created within your own practice. I bet that 5 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined you would be doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And it's consistency, isn't it? And I think consistency, not like perfection. So like I would say I'm consistent in showing up in my business and trying new things, but I'm not perfect. Like there will be weeks and weeks and weeks that go by, school summer holiday, prime example, where I'm not actively working on anything new. I'm kind of fairly hands off because I'm trying to parent. And, I just let things tick over. But the consistency for me is even when I have a period like that, that's quite quiet, is at some point I'm going to show up again with a plan and an idea. And I think like you have to be consistent in pursuing new things and trying things and turning ideas into action, even if it, is a bit messy, like my diary.
Action.
Yeah, yeah, that's it, isn't it? Just and getting it your own way. Like I remember with my website, I had real barriers to publishing and just going live because I wanted it to be perfect. And then it was like a real light bulb moment when I thought, well, I'll just publish it and then I can change it as I go.
Can change, everything can evolve. And I think it's a really lovely message, I think, for therapists that are listening to hear this, that had you not have had that little bit of, I'm just going to try, I'm going to take imperfect action and it not be this perfect journey will be inspiring for other people to encourage them to actually pursue your goals, pursue your dreams. It's going to look a little bit messy along the way, but it's absolutely possible for you. And is there anything for maybe people who are interested in setting up in private practice or who are maybe interested in setting up and evolving into an associate practice, any little kind of final words of wisdom or inspiration that you would give them? Anything that you've maybe learned that you would do differently, perhaps yourself?
think there's always loads of stuff that we can look back and evaluate and think we would do differently, right? But I think fundamentally, it does just boil down to like taking action, like doing something, even if that something is not perfect, even if that something doesn't turn out the way you hope it would, but taking that action and then checking out how that looks, how that feels, then taking another action. Like you have to have that consistency of showing up and doing things. And I don't think there's a magic formula. And I don't think, like I'm not special. My practice is not special. The truth is, like, I am doing the things now that I dreamed about doing a few years ago. But that's not because I'm special. It's just because I kind of just keep showing up and I keep, evolving things and adapting things and chasing down opportunities. So you've got to show up, haven't you?
Brilliant. That's great advice. And tell people, Shelley, because we didn't even get to talk about supervision or any of the things that you do. So you'll have to come back again and we'll talk about that another time. But for people who are interested in checking out what you've done, where can they find you?
So you can find me on Instagram, Fortitude Psychological Therapy, or you can just search for my name. I don't think there's any other Shelley Bradley Scolies out there, so I'm pretty easy to find. But I'm quite present on Instagram, both in terms of like that sort of more professional content, and I'm often on my stories chirping on about my daily life and the challenges. You can also find me on my website, which is www.fortitudepsychologicaltherapy.co.uk.
Fabulous. And I'll put all the links to all of your social media and your website underneath the show notes so people can go and check you out. But thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed that conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been lovely.
So that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you found the episode helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could share it with other counsellors and therapists in private practice. If you'd like to find out more about me and how I can help you build and grow your private practice, hop on over to my website, which is www.prosperinprivatepractice.com, and you'll also find me on Instagram under the same name. But until next time, I will see you soon. Take care.